All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Rem Homan. I'm a rising junior at Tufts, majoring in international relations with a focus on globalization. Um, and this is Keeping Democracy Alive. This will be episode 11. I'm here with Dave Cavell, running for Congress, 4th District of Massachusetts. And this series, I'm super thankful that I have this series because it has provided me with opportunities like this. And so I have to say thank you, as usual, to Tufts Hillel and to the Cummings for providing me with this opportunity. This is more or less an extension of, it is an extension of my work with the Cummings Foundation and the programming for Holocaust and genocide awareness and education through Hillel. So I'm going to let Dave introduce himself, and then we'll get into this conversation.
Well, Rem, thank you for having me. It is always a thrill, even virtually, to be back at Tufts and to be talking to a fellow jumbo. So thank you for having me on. You're right. I am currently a candidate in the Democratic primary in the 4th Congressional District here in Massachusetts. That primary is on September 1st, and then the general election, of course, is in November. Before that, we can talk about, my career and how Tufts set me up for all of it. But yes, I was before this a senior advisor and assistant attorney general to our Attorney General, Maura Healey, incredible Attorney General. 2 weeks before, I was working with her and suing the White House. I was actually working at the White House. I was a presidential speechwriter for President Obama and the First Lady, which was incredible. I got there after practicing law for a little bit and going to law school. And then I'd actually started out in public service in Governor Deval Patrick's office here in the State House in Massachusetts. And so I came to that job from Teach for America, from teaching 4th grade in the South Bronx. And I came to that job, now we've worked our way back to the most important fact about me, which is that in 2006, I graduated from Tufts University. I was a poli-sci major, and to anybody watching who writes for The Daily, I was managing editor of The Daily in spring 2006. So it is a thrill to be back and to talk all things Tufts with you.
Well, that's a great introduction because I wanted to ask you about Tufts to start off. It's weird because I don't know exactly how many people I've had here who have graduated from Tufts, but I've had at least 3 or 4, maybe even 5 who have graduated from Tufts. And normally I'll just ask them like how Tufts influenced them. But for you, I want to ask you a different question. I want to ask you, why do you think it is the case that I have had so many Tufts people? What do you think it is about Tufts that has shaped all these people to be interested in social justice?
Yeah, beyond Tufts just being the best place with the best people, you mean? Beyond that?
Exactly.
No, it is a really good question, and it's one I've actually asked myself as well. And I think that some of it has to do with Tufts being a little self-selecting. I mean, who are people that are drawn to a school that is known for having a college of citizenship, that is known for having an experimental college where, students can sort of direct their own learning, that is known for in a real engagement with the broader world, where a lot of students travel internationally and spend semesters abroad and engage with the world. I mean, I think that there are some elements of Tufts that attract students who are committed to public service, who are committed to, the repair of the world. These values that as Jews we learn growing up in our faith tradition and in our communities, but that so many people of so many faith traditions or no faith tradition at all are brought to as well. And so I think that attracts a lot of people who are committed to those values and committed to that work. And I certainly have seen that firsthand in terms of what my friends from my class at Tufts went on to do. Frankly, I think it was evident in the fact that my senior year at Tufts introduced me to my best friend and the love of my life, Kate Cavell, my wife. Mm-hmm. We had known each other a little bit earlier in our time at Tufts, but we really got to know each other when we were working on The Daily together. And also, my time at Tufts introduced me to my career because I took a class called PS 99 and Leave It to Tufts to allow students to intern for credit, to engage with the world for credit. And that was the course that I used to intern for credit with a candidate for office named Deval Patrick when he was running for governor of Massachusetts. And that's the course that allowed me to meet people on the campaign, to see that I really loved interning on that campaign. And it was while I was an intern there that I got the first opportunity to write an op-ed for the candidate, for candidate Deval Patrick. And that is what allowed me to keep writing for him. And it's what led me eventually to being his speechwriter. So, I think that there are a lot of answers to that question, but I think that, the character of the school, the character of who comes to Tufts, and the responsibility that I think professors and students and administrators and staff at the school have for upholding and continuing that legacy is real.
Yeah, I would agree. I wanted to ask also about your parents. I was reading on your page just about who you are, and most people, when they're writing about me, they're gonna write about me, what I've done, like all the different things I've done. But I don't know if it was your first or second paragraph, but very early on, you're already mentioning your parents. I mean, your grandparents as well. You're mentioning how they were immigrants, but you mentioned your mom and the work that she was doing, and your dad and the work that he did, and the thing. I'm now just connecting this as I speak, actually, how he was an author and how you like to write as well, and the work he did during the civil rights era. So yeah, I wanted to ask you just about their influence on you.
Well, I'm thrilled that you brought this up. It's one of my favorite subjects. I am one of those people who was incredibly fortunate to have parents who deeply cared about me, who deeply cared about the world, and who really taught me what it means to be a citizen of this country and this planet. You're right, my father. I got the sense that you have a background in Atlanta, Georgia, as well.
I do.
So my father grew up. He was, there weren't that many Jewish families in Atlanta in that era, but he grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, in the Depression. And his mother played music and vaudeville and in silent theaters. She faced discrimination, as did his father, as Jewish immigrants, and it was difficult for them to find stable, well-paying jobs. But he used that experience to start out playing jazz and start out, thinking about what he wanted to do with his life, and ended up becoming the first in his family to complete college. And then he went on to become a university professor. But as you say, he went down in 1964 to Mississippi in what became known as the Freedom Summer, when there were people, particularly Black Americans in Mississippi, who were being threatened and murdered, in fact, for trying to register to vote. And I always thought it was fascinating that my dad, whenever he'd tell me about that, would say he was disappointed that was known as the Freedom Summer, because he felt like the message of that summer was that every summer needs to be the Freedom Summer, that there's always going to be people who are suffering from discrimination and injustice, who need people to stand up and fight for them, and that every summer could be the Freedom Summer for someone. So that was instructive. And then I had a mother who, for Halloween when I was 4 years old, she dressed me up in glasses and a suit and tie. And she had me go house to house and say, "Hi, I'm George H.W. Bush, and I'm here to say goodbye." And that was because she was wearing a Michael Dukakis pin, who was running for president that year. And my mother had been involved in social justice work and democratic political advocacy for years, even before I was born.
Yeah.
And so, I did have these wonderful models, right? These people who cared deeply about public service and really taught me that it is possible to make a difference, and that it is your obligation to look out for others and make this world closer to what you think it can and should be.
Let's talk about another one of those models, the man sitting right behind you on that book cover. What was it like not only working for him, but also working with Michelle and just like being around the family. Um, how did it change your life?
Well, in so many ways. I
Yeah,
mean, the I will say that first of all, I did not expect to end up being a presidential speechwriter in the
yeah,
White House for this incredible president and first lady. I did not expect to get to work there every day. In fact, I would wake up every day, and there would be this moment, of course, when you wake up where you kind of are trying to orient yourself, and then all of a sudden I would remember, oh my God, I get to go to work today,
yeah.
and I get to have this job and work with these people, and that just every single day made me thrilled to wake up and go to work and do that job and help them do the work that they were doing. And the most sort of memorable thing very early on that I noticed was that, the Obamas were brilliant. They were these incredibly high achieving, incredibly thoughtful, incredibly wise people um, who had, in fact, when they got to the White House and when they got into office, surrounded themselves with the other, like, most capable, thoughtful people they could find in the country. They had surrounded themselves with experts and leaders on every single issue to help advise them, because they knew that no matter how much no matter whether you think you do have the best words, as our current president has said, the real mark of leadership, the real mark of somebody who is genuinely thoughtful and passionate about public service, is having different views presented to you, is having experts really talk to you about what's really happening, and being able to understand their guidance and where they're coming from and why, analyzing all the facts and coming to what's closest to the right answer. And I think that was a real lesson. That was very instructive to me. And you referenced this book that's on my bookshelf. I love this book, and for those of you who are watching, I highly recommend it. It's about, I don't even know, 400 pages of wonderful photographs from 8 years of the Obama
Oh,
administration.
okay.
It's the Pete Souza book.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I don't know if you have this book, if you've looked at it yourself.
Haven't, but
But
I've heard amazing things about it. I thought it was his autobiography for a second.
oh, no, that's forthcoming. That has not. That would be this would be the first copy of it. But no, this is the book of photographs from Pete Souza, and it's all 8 years. It's these beautiful photographs, and I'm in the saddest one in the book, the one that most people probably skip. But it's from the morning after the Trump election, and it is a photo of about 20 of us in the Oval Office that next morning, and the president is speaking to us, and what he's saying is effectively, I was only going to be president until January, and no matter what happened in this election, I wasn't going to be president. So frankly, if you're upset about what happened in this election, or if you care about the issues that we've been working on, take the weekend, take some time, and then come back and tell me what you're going to do about this. I mean, this is your country, this is your work, and if you want to change things, figure out how you're going to change them. And I think that really resonated with me. It's the lesson that I was taught by my parents. It's the lesson that I saw up close in Governor Patrick's office and when I was a teacher. And it really resonated with me that, ultimately, the only thing that actually makes a difference in this country is when, folks stand up and march and protest and vote and work to change policy and organize and advocate and slowly make things a little bit better for more people. And that's the way that this work gets done. And I think that was an important lesson for me to reflect upon and think about at a difficult time for the country, and a difficult time, for a lot of us in the White House.
I gotta say that gave me chills. Can't make that up. Like, I've struggled throughout the past 10 episodes of feeling like I shouldn't specifically mention Trump or any other names, and I don't think it's right, and I don't want to take the time to talk about Trump, but I want to take the time, like 20 seconds, to talk about Obama, and
Sure.
just how human he is. I just don't know what word to choose. Like, he just is such a just an inspiration. And I'm super jealous, first of all, that you were able to sit in front of him, but the fact that his words spoken through you are able to give me chills is just, it's just incredible. And I yeah, I yearn for the day when we have another person like him in office. And right now, based off our 20 minutes so far, it seems like you could be that person. But to his
Oh,
question,
Ron, that's a very nice thing
I
to say.
know, I got you, I got you.
Jeez, I look. I'll just say quickly, and you're right. You should use your show as you see fit, and talk about who you want to talk about. But what I would say is just there's a word that's used in politics sometimes, authenticity, and I think that it is. I recognize it too. People in this country have a pretty good sense of who's being real with them and who's not. And I think that that's all that authenticity at the end of the day really means, is who is actually a human being, who is actually talking to you like you're a human being, and not just a voter to persuade, or a statistic, or somebody that you want to try to win over, right? I mean, who is actually recognizing that, like, at the end of the day, we're just human beings, and we are all, those of us who are in public service or who care about this work, we're all just trying to figure out how to make life a little bit better and a little bit fairer and a little bit more equal for people.
Yeah.
And so, that work is hard and complicated and takes time, but at the end of the day, that's the only way it gets done. And so I think that President Obama, to your point, had this incredible ability to connect with people as human beings, and to just, connect with them, not in terms of just sort of being a Democrat or not just in terms of being an American even or not, but just at a human level, to recognize the fundamental dignity that every person has, and to treat everybody with respect. I think that's a really important example that I think a lot of us, you and me included, draw from him.
Well, let's talk about how you're doing that. I was when I was sent info about you, one of the things that I was sent was, I don't even know, like, I'm gonna look at it quickly. I don't even know how to call it. It's on your website, but you have like this amazing little thing that I've never seen on any other politician. Not even like bands do this. You have just like a Q&A thing where it's open questions for Dave. And then you have Dave's answers, you have yourself being recorded, sometimes in front of in this very room, and then at the end of the videos, I just finished watching one. Does this answer make you more likely or less likely to support Dave for Congress? Just like the whole, I want you to talk about that first of all and what inspired you to do that. But like, you're talking to me right now about Obama and how everyone's human and everyone wants to be treated like a human and heard. And that's literally what you're doing right here. You're letting people ask you the questions and you're coming back at them with what you think. So I want to ask you, what led to you making that and deciding this is the right idea? Like, why did you do that?
Well, this
and how has it been going as well? Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, of course. I mean, look, Rem, I know that this is only your 11th episode, but you're very good at asking questions, and very thoughtful questions, and this is one of them. I mean, and so I'm gonna get to an answer, but I'm gonna start that answer actually before I even answer that question by saying, to back up, I got into this race and I decided to run for Congress despite the loan debt that Kate and I still have, and the challenges of running for office, because I thought that we really needed, at a moment of crisis for our country, and this is, last fall, remember, that we needed to restore that kind of professionalism and integrity and experience to this work. And so, I'd been taught how to be in politics by Deval Patrick and Barack Obama and Maura Healey, that the way to do that work is to talk to everyone everywhere about everything, and to be totally open about how to do that. So we were doing that right up until this global pandemic, when we couldn't go door to door, and I couldn't be doing what I would be doing right now, which is going around in neighborhoods and knocking on people's doors and asking them what they care about and talking about why I'm running. And in this moment, we actually decided, and I decided, that it's actually more important than ever to engage people in this work. And my view is that what we are seeing right now is a consequence of a lack of leadership in the federal government, of a lack of attention and care for people and for communities, and particularly vulnerable communities. And so I felt like the only way to respond to that is to figure out how to still reach out to people and still talk to people. And so actually, speaking of how Tufts helped give me everything I have in my life, there was a friend of mine who was also class of 2006 named Dave Baumwell. And Dave was a good friend and somebody who, as I think as a junior, had become president of TCU. Dave reached out, and I was talking to him about how I still wanted to be able to talk to people. And he suggested, we have this platform. We haven't figured out what to do with it. Do you think it could be useful? And so we started talking to him and his brother about what it could do. This wasn't a platform that existed. This isn't off the shelf. We actually worked with Dave and his brother on the campaign to build this just for us, just to see if it worked. Yeah. And as you say, it's a platform that we believe is the first true digital door knocking program in the country, that allows anybody, exactly as you say, to pop on, type in a question, let me know what's on their mind, what they want me to answer, anything that they care about, and then I hop on and record a response, and they get notified when I do. And you can watch those responses, as it sounds like you just were. And if you don't see a question that you have already answered, you can ask another one, or you can vote for another open question that you think I should answer sooner, or whatever the case may be. But basically, it's a way of still reaching out to people. It's a way of still engaging them in this work. It's a way of still having a conversation about our shared future, because I feel like that conversation matters now more than ever. This is still a time where we need to make really big, important choices about our future, about what we care about, about how to protect vulnerable people and make this country more equitable and safer and securer for all of us. And so, the only way to do that right now is digitally. And so that's what we've tried to figure out how to do.
Yeah, I relate to that. I mean, this whole series started off more or less like around the same idea. I was supposed to have some speaker come to Tufts and talk. Didn't work out, so we pivoted and we decided, why don't we do, at first it was just one episode, and then it turned into this. So yeah, I mean, something you just said like struck a chord with something I read that you wrote, but I don't know how fluid this will be, but I wanted to ask you about this because I just really liked the way you said this. I think gerrymandering is often, people talk about it, but it's overlooked a lot. And the way people talk about it, it's typically just like, they're often, when it's talked about, people are just trying to describe to another person what it is. It's never really formally talked about, like, here is how we can fix it. Or it's never really described, here is what it is. And I liked what you said. You said in one of these videos, gerrymandering, and my quote could be a little misworded, but I wrote, ensuring it isn't politicians choosing their voters, but voters choosing their politicians. Mm-hmm. I want to ask you about that and why you chose those words and what you would do to fix gerrymandering and why it's an important issue as well. Like why is this something that people need to consider more? Because for years, gerrymandering's existed. And for years, politicians have been reelected based off their incumbency because they know how to work the system rather than working the people and appealing to the people. So take that question how you want it.
Well, I'm glad to take it because it's a really important question.
Yeah.
And I don't have to tell you about partisan gerrymandering. Certainly in Georgia, you're unfortunately quite well aware of partisan gerrymandering, as we are in Massachusetts as well. And I think it's important here to acknowledge that we actually invented partisan gerrymandering. Governor Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts. You're welcome, America. But, look, gerrymandering, exactly as you say, is a system in which, instead of what you'd imagine democracy to be, instead of just having a debate on the merits and winning that debate and then being elected because you won the debate and you were right on the issues and you got people to agree with you. Instead, there were some folks who figured out an easier way is to not even win that debate, but to pick who's going to even vote in the election and make sure that you are picking communities that already agree with you so that you have a safe, majority-proof district that you don't have to win any debates, that you don't have to win any arguments. You can just automatically win if you're ideologically aligned with the people that you picked in your district. And so fundamentally, I believe that's wrong. That is not how democracy works. You should not be able to pick your voters. Voters should pick you. Voters should pick their public servants. And so that you got the quote exactly right. And, look, I think that it is a broader reflection of the ways in which our democracy has been under assault for a long time. And again, let's talk about Georgia for a second. Stacey Abrams, in my view, should be the governor of Georgia today. And she's not. And it's not because she wasn't the better candidate, in my view. It's not because she didn't win the debates, in my view. It's because she faced voter suppression, predominantly in African-American communities, where polling places were closed, where voting ranks were purged, and where she lost the election for governor. And so this is a pattern that we have seen in a lot of states, in a lot of communities in this country, and at elections at every level, where, yes, in partisan gerrymandering, it's about, politicians picking their voters. But in a race like the governor's race, which is statewide, it's also about purging voters. It's about, not even trying to win debates, but to prevent people who disagree from even participating in elections, whether that's voter ID laws, preventing early voting and same-day registration and election day registration, the attempts we've seen right now to block vote by mail efforts and to make it impossible for Americans to not have to choose between their health and safety and participating in democracy, which I think is wrong. So the question is, what do we do about it? And so I have a whole bunch of ideas about ways that we can save our democracy. And this, frankly, should not be a partisan issue. If you support democracy, if you support Americans being able to cast their ballots and have their voices heard and get a government that reflects America, then you should support these ideas. And you're right, it begins with ending partisan gerrymandering, with getting dark money out of politics. As an attorney, the Citizens United decision gets crazier every time I read it, frankly. It makes no sense, and we need to reform our political finance system. It means expanding early registration, same-day registration, election day registration. It means expanding universal vote by mail. A whole host of reforms that would make this government work again, that would make sure that our elections are safe and free and fair. And another thing that I've advocated for is ranked choice voting, because a race like mine, I think, is a perfect example of this point. I'm running in the 4th Congressional District Democratic primary in Massachusetts. There are 9 candidates. One of us could win this race with 20% of the vote. There's no runoff. If you win by 1 vote, you win. You win the Democratic primary and you advance. I think that it would make a lot more sense to let people rank their candidates and have a number of preferences as opposed to having to choose one and vote against everyone else. But Rem, the last point I would make here, and I hope that this isn't too partisan of a point, but I think that as we recognize the ways our democracy has been undermined, it's also worth asking why. It's worth asking, what should make someone so afraid of the consequences of people voting? And I think that it's because on a lot of these issues that we are told the country is so divided on, we are actually not quite as divided as we're led to believe. And I saw this every single day in the White House. I would get these poll results that would show me that 85% of Americans thought that if you had a pre-existing health condition, you should still be able to get health insurance and not go bankrupt when you get sick. That 91% of Americans think that if you want to buy a gun, you should have to pass a background check to do so. 75% of Americans think that the climate crisis is real. I mean, I just think the only reason that people are so afraid of Americans voting is when they know that Americans don't agree with them. And I think that should give all of us pause about any measure that makes it harder for people to vote.
Yeah. I need to take a minute. That was a lot in a good way. Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna ask the next question. I'm not even gonna reflect on that because I think people are gonna reflect on that on their own. They don't need to hear my reflection. You mentioned at the end, 75% of Americans believe in the climate crisis. Let's talk about the climate crisis for 2 reasons. One, I haven't had anyone on here who specifically does work pertaining to climate injustice. And 2, I think that oftentimes people overlook how connected climate justice and work towards, I don't know what I'm trying to say, and doing work towards bettering the environment is actually linked to social justice, and how we need to start preparing for the future, not only for ourselves, but for our future generations. I wrote something down here. So yeah, I feel as if our country needs to take more care in the way that we're disposing things and releasing pollutants into our environment. So I want you to talk about the Green New Deal and how you would crack down on fossil fuel, particularly what you'd say to a lobbyist who is for coal or for, I don't know, expanding our oil wells, like the Dakota pipeline that we're seeing. Like,
Right.
what would you say to these people? Yeah, yeah,
Well, I mean, look, to these lobbyists, I can just start there. I'll start by saying, your time is over. I sued you and beat you in federal court before, and now I'm going to be in Congress. And, look, this is one of the reasons I ran. I felt like the climate crisis is an existential threat to our planet.
yeah,
And if you, Rem, and me, and the folks watching at Tufts, if we want to live on a planet that is healthy, where we can breathe the air and drink the water, and live on a planet that is safe and stable and secure, we have no choice. We have to save this planet. And we're running out of time. We've kicked the can down the road a long time, and we've run out of road.
yeah,
So this is one of the reasons I ran. One of the first things I hope to vote for as a member of Congress is the Green New Deal. And here's why. I think the Green New Deal, one of the things I love about it is that it recognizes, as you did in your question, that the challenges that we face are intersectional. And the fact that we have a planet that is in distress is actually related to another point that you made, which is that there is no justice without climate justice. And there is no way to reinvent our economy for the 21st century unless we reinvent ours to be a clean energy economy. That's the job of the future. Those are the industries of the future. That's how we're going to power the future. So, the Green New Deal is an absolute imperative. It is something we have to pass. And then it is up to us, I think, to lead the way in the 4th District. And somebody asked me recently whether I thought that in the coronavirus pandemic, we were actually going to lose some of our attention to the crisis our planet is in. And I actually think there's never been a more important moment to focus on the climate crisis, because yes, the climate crisis is about saving this planet and saving our communities in the South Coast from being flooded, saving the worst, most disastrous, catastrophic consequences of climate crisis. But at the same time, this is also about saving and reinventing our economy, which is something that we need to do right now. And to your point about coal, one of my favorite statistics is that there are only 50,000 coal jobs left in the entire country, total 50,000. And there are 110,000 clean energy jobs in Massachusetts alone right now. So I think that statistic to me illustrates the whole ballgame here, which is that this is a win for every reason. This is a win because it saves our planet, but it's also a win because right now we are headed toward 25% unemployment in a place like the 4th Congressional District, in a place like Fall River. And what better way to address that than by completing South Coast Rail so that people can actually get to the jobs of the future, by moving toward tuition-free public colleges and universities so that people can go to Bristol Community College and have a pathway to these careers, and by tripling down on offshore Atlantic wind, on solar panels, on electric vehicle infrastructure, on mass transit, on everything else that the green economy promises, and that we can do if we invest in it here in the 4th Congressional District and across the country.
yeah,
And the last point I want to make is just about what you brought up, which was climate injustice. And I started out as a 4th grade public school teacher in the South Bronx. As I said, that was my first job out of Tufts. I had 32 students in my classroom in the South Bronx. Half of them had asthma. They were 10. Half of them had asthma, and so when we would get up the stairs to my classroom every morning, we would have to take breaks so that they could catch their breath. That was environmental injustice. More to the point, it was environmental racism. There are communities of color that have been polluted intentionally for decades, that have highways built over them and airports built next to them and factories within them spewing out pollutants. That needs to stop. And the Green New Deal is our blueprint for how to stop it and how to build a future that is cleaner and healthier and safer and more equal. And I'm going to fight for that every day.
When you say I'm going to fight for that, are you fighting? I mean, you said this in your own statement, and I'm just trying to understand. You said at the end of this quote that this is not the quote. What I read earlier was my own question. This is the end of a quote that you have about climate change on your website. Talk about all the things that need to be changed, and then you end, which I love, with the quote or open quote, where the interests of everyday people are put before the profits of big corporations, end quote. When you say fight, are you talking about fighting? Is it big corporations you're fighting? Because I don't personally know, but what I do know is, like, in my everyday experience, when I'm talking to Tufts students, when I'm talking to my parents' friends, or when I'm talking to my older brothers or their friends, the people that are closer to me seem to all be on the same page about this. So is it these people with massive amounts of money and, like, who just want to ensure that their kids are going to inherit all this money that are fighting for it? Or is it actually much deeper than that, and there's genuinely people who might not have a money stake but just don't believe in it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a combination of a few things. The first of all is that we need to build coalitions to get these things done, right? As we were saying, the majority of Americans agree with this. It's actually not controversial, but we need to vote like that. And so we need to save our democracy, as we were just talking about before, and make sure that our elections actually reflect that majority view in this country and the preferences of the people who go to the polls. We need to make it easier for people to cast those ballots. And then we need to make sure that this is a voting issue for people. We need to make sure that if people agree that the climate crisis is real and that we need green jobs and we have to save this planet, show up and vote like that. Vote against anybody that doesn't believe that. Vote for people who do believe that, and hold us accountable. If we're not actually showing up and doing that work and making that reality happen in this country, vote us out and vote in people who will. So I think that that's an important lesson. But then to the back part of your question about, who's standing up and opposing this, well, look, the fossil fuel industry recognizes that this is headed toward extinction for them. If we really move toward a green economy that produces our own energy and our own economy here without fossil fuels that are destroying this planet, that endangers them. And so they spent, I believe it was over $350 million in the last election cycle on candidates and on races where they could elect candidates who supported the fossil fuel industry and didn't support the green economy. And, that is outrageous. So it's why I support stronger regulations on former government employees and on lobbying activities, and lifetime bans on former members of Congress who would want to lobby in this industry. It's why I think we need, one of the reasons I'm running for this is because I think we need people for whom the climate crisis is not just a priority. It's not just something that we care about, but it's actually been our work. I mean, when I was in the Attorney General's office, we investigated ExxonMobil. And ExxonMobil, we discovered, had spent decades lying about the climate crisis. They knew, scientists had warned them in the 1960s what was going to happen to this planet if they kept pumping greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And they did it anyway because they could make billions of dollars in profit by doing so. When I was in the Attorney General's office, we took on the Trump EPA and stopped them from ripping apart environmental regulations like the Clean Water Act and the Endangered Species Act, and trying to open up the whole Atlantic seaboard to offshore oil drilling. Again, because there were influential lobbyists and people that had donated to the Trump administration who wanted them to do those things. And so this fight is not abstract. This has been the work that I've been proud to do in government, and would be proud to do as a member of Congress from this district.
I have two more questions. The first question I asked last week to Senator Roush, and I heard it on a Ezra Klein Vox podcast where he was interviewing Ta-Nehisi Coates. Also, the question is honestly one of the more simple questions you probably will ever be asked, but strangely a more complicated question than you might realize. And all it is what does democracy mean to you?
Hmm. That is a deep question.
Yeah, and you can answer it however you like. I mean, obviously, I don't think there's a right answer. I think that's what Ezra said. That's what, like, Ezra's definition, Ta-Nehisi Coates' definition, Senator Roush's definition, my definition. They were all different, but had similar traits. So
Yeah.
take it.
Well, it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from somebody who actually used to be the member of Congress from the 4th Congressional District when I was growing up, named Barney Frank. And he used to say that government is just the name we give to the things we choose to do together. There's a lot of things to be said about democracy, the ways in which it's imperfect, the ways in which people have undermined it, the ways in which it, has been corrupted by the influence of big corporations and wealthy people, and by partisan gerrymandering, not to reflect the actual will of people in this country. But at its core, that's all that democracy is a name we give to the things that we're trying to do together. And at its core, I still believe that what we want to do together and what is represented in all those polls I was talking about, what is represented anytime that you really, for the most part, have a real honest conversation with people about what their values are. Do you think that everybody deserves to live in a world that is safe and secure, where you can breathe the air and drink the water? Do you think that every child deserves to go to an excellent school and get an excellent education? Do you think that people who are sick deserve care, and that in fact, healthcare is a human right, and that everyone should have it, and that no one should have to live in a system of injustice? The answers to those questions will be yes. An overwhelming majority of the time, they will be yes. So what democracy means to me is figuring out how to make that a reality, how to actually turn a system where fundamentally I believe people are good and want good outcomes in this world for all, how to actually turn that system into our reality, how to actually confront a country that has not lived up to that reality for 400 years, that has been imbued with systemic racism since its founding, that has not lived up to its promise in so many other ways. How do we change that? How do we reimagine what democracy could look like if everyone's voices were included, if everyone were at the table, and if everyone worked together to rebuild this country as it should be, and I believe can be? So you're right, there are a lot of potential answers to this question, but I think even asking that question is part of that work.
I agree. Final question. Every person who comes on gets asked this question. What can the listener to this podcast, which I guess to you could also imply, what could someone living in the 4th District of Massachusetts, what could they do in order to make this country a better place, let's say? In order for you to have the job be the easiest, for you to maybe even not be needed, like what can people do?
Well, unfortunately, we're all needed.
Yeah,
right
that's
now.
true. That's true. Yeah.
And so, look, I think I'll start by being self-interested, and I'll say, you can go to davecavell.com. You can engage with us on Facebook or on Twitter or anywhere else, and you can be part of this work. You can vote on September 1st. You can encourage other people to vote on September 1st and participate in democracy and participate in reshaping this country and getting us back on the right track. You should vote, in my view, as if people's lives depend on it, because frankly, they do. But the last point that I would make here, and I'll go back to use a partisan example, and I will use President Trump as the example, but I'll generalize the point beyond it, which is that when people say to me, I'm worried about President Trump getting reelected, or I don't want President Trump to get reelected, what I say to them is, okay, I get that. So why don't you assign a percentage of the likelihood that you think that he will get reelected? I get different answers. Sometimes people say, I don't know, 70%. Sometimes they say 40%. Sometimes they say 20%. I say, okay, well, if it's 40%, take a breath and tell me, what are 3 things that you are going to do to make it 39% or 38%? Who are you going to call? Who are you going to reach out to? What are you going to do? And I think that seeing ourselves in the way that President Obama reminded me that we need to see ourselves, which is as people with agency, as people who can change the things that we want to change. And, recognizing that, in my view, injustice often resides at the local level. Injustice is present in every community. And every community, therefore, has opportunities to fight back against injustice, to sign up and teach ESL classes, to sign up with your local organizing groups, progressive organizing groups or otherwise, to help other people in your life and in your community in tangible ways. There is always something that you can do, whoever you are, wherever you are watching this from. This is your moment. This is your time. The country needs you. We can rebuild something better. We absolutely can. We are at a moment of historical generational crisis. We are also at a moment of historical generational opportunity. The young people who are taking to the streets, whether it's at a Black Lives Matter protest, protesting the climate crisis, protesting gun violence, or anything else, they're not sitting and waiting around for somebody else to change things. They're going out and changing them themselves. And I think that's a lesson to all of us. So what I would say is, in the fight between cynicism and optimism, choose optimism and then act like that.
Dave, thank you so much. Honestly, that was an amazing conversation. And again, like I said before, I'm super honored that you were even had the time to talk to me and spent 40 minutes doing so once you did. So thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure, Rem. And I look forward to many, many, many more episodes of this. You're clearly very good at asking questions and having interesting conversations. So note that is a tangible way to help make things a little bit better. So thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Have a great day.
Bye. You too, Rem.